I don't know, the fight is getting worse and worse. We wonder if we should change the times.
I woke up this morning.
Would you do the Hatun?
Sorry?
You do the Hatun?
I'm not sure if I'm going to be there or not. So
Why?
I've got an appointment with my wife at 8. I'm not sure what time I'm going to finish. Toddy can also not come?
It's Tabigid, he doesn't want to do the Hatun. Okay, fine. We're up to the second Mishnah in the 7th period.
I'm not sure if I'm going to try to come, but I'm not sure if I can come.
So you're not sure, so you don't do that, you don't commit to the Hatun.
I haven't even said, don't buy any food for me.
Oh. Says the Mishnah, the second Mishnah on Daf Yutes Amud Aleph. Money which is found in front of the people who sell animals. La'olam Maisa, it's always Maisa, because as we once mentioned, the Chazal instituted that a person should buy with his money, for Maisa Sheni money, he should buy animals. Uba Harabais, any money which is found in the Harabais, Cholin, it's always Cholin, because people do not go to the Harabais to buy animals, therefore, all the money found in the Harabais is Cholin. Ubi Yerushalayim, the Shekal Beis Shona depends. Rest of the year Cholin, B'Shas Avegel Kol Maisa on Yom Tov it's all Maisa, because on Yom Tov, just before Yom Tov, people would come in to buy the Maisa Sheni animals. Yes. Meat found in the Azon, you don't know what it is. A voim, if it's very, very big pieces, like limbs, like a whole leg, oilos, it must be an oilo. Because what would they do with the oilo? They burn it on the mizbeach. So they won't cut up into small pieces. It wasn't necessary. They just put the whole limb onto the mizbeach. The chatichos, if it's small pieces, which people can eat, chatos must be what the kohanim are going to eat. So it's a chatos. Or Yerushalayim, zivchei shlomim. Yerushalayim would be zivchei shlomim because at the end of the day, people would eat outside the Beis Hamikdash small pieces of meat of shlomim. Whether it was a chatos, oilo, or shlomim, whatever it would be, we would wait for overnight that it should be possible belina and then burn it. So what difference does it make what it was? The afkamina would be if somebody did not wait overnight and got to eat it, whether it was over on the eel or not. But the ma'isa, nobody could actually eat it because you don't know if it was possible. It might be tomei, might be yotze, might be anything. So therefore, whatever happened, you took it out to Beis HaSreifa. Nimsa big volin, if it was found outside Yerushalayim, a vorim, big pieces, nevelas. If you find a very big piece of meat, it's likely to be a nevela. Why? Because what do you do with a dead animal which you can't eat? Because it's not. Oh, and if that's right, by shaking, if you can't, it's not kosher. Give it to a dog or something. You know, it's not cutting up into small pieces for a dog or for whatever may be for chazim. So therefore, it's going to be nevelas. The chatichos, if it's small pieces, motoris, it is mutter top of the utensils. That's b'shas v'regel shabbos meruba. During Yom Tov, everybody's very, very busy eating meat. So therefore, everybody has to have meat. Even the big, big pieces is also okay because everybody's busy looking for meat. Says the Mishnah, can it be that is it impossible to have Kaddish money on Har Bayis? Many times there isn't Kaddish money on Har Bayis. If a person goes out of the Lishka taking money of the Machzah Shekah, many times we Kaddish. The Kohanim were very careful with Hekdesh money. What they would do is like this. They would not take it out of the chamber, out of the room, before they knew which animal it was going to be designated for. And they would straight away be mechalit on that money. So that way, they shouldn't have Kaddish money just floating around. So therefore, what happened was, as soon as they left, as soon as on Har Bayis, you could be sure that it was ready chulin. A person who does not look after the meat, it needs to be destroyed. If you got a piece of meat of kodshim, siyah das is hesach das, the ayin is sort of a ches. The minute a person is mesiach das from kodshim, the kodshim needs to be destroyed. No, what you do is wait for it to go over nacht, so then it becomes possible because of lina, and then you burn it. That means kodshim meat needs to be looked after every single minute, like matzahs. Mishnah says that you have to wait for nacht, and then you take it out to Beis HaSreifa. And that's correct. Why? You can't eat it, maybe something went wrong. From Cain, therefore, you've got no choice but to take it to Beis HaSreifa. So it comes out if there's hesach hadas and bos of kodshim, you're not allowed to eat it. That means if, let's example, you've got meat of kodshim and you won't watch it for 1 minute, you're not allowed to eat it because for all you know, it became tummy and something might have happened to it, so therefore you're not allowed to eat it. If a person eats a big piece of meat in outside Beis Hamikdash, he actually gets malchus. Why? This logic that it must be an Avela is so certain that it's not pshat, maybe he was over an Avela. We are sure he was over an Avela, and we give him malchus. Says the Gemara. Masdite Omoking. The Mishnah says so. Why? Mishnah says it means literally mutter. You're actually allowed to eat it because it's been looked after. So if a person goes outside and eats a massive piece of meat, since the logic is that nobody's looked after it because it's obviously not kosher, and if it's going for dogs or something, so the person actually gets malchus. We don't say it's a suffix, but rather gets definitely malchus. This is a famous halacha. No, the next halacha. If it's stringed motoris, the fact that you string the pieces together, that's already a certain amount of preparation, and it's a raya, therefore that it is, therefore it's considered to be kosher meat. Says the Gemara, this is a famous halacha. We paskin that you always go after roiv. So if the majority of the shops in town are kosher, it's kosher. If the majority of towns are not kosher, it's straight. But there's a certain rule called kavua. Kol kavua k'mechza mechza, meaning that if the suffix came up by an established place, not that you know, it's not like we're not sure from which shop it came from, but you saw it coming out of a shop, you just don't know which shop it came from. Since we can see in front of us a kosher shop or a treifa shop, whatever it may be, so therefore we say kol kavua k'mechza mechza, we don't go after roiv. It's a special gezeres hakosher which has no logic to it, but it's halacha.
Five kosher butchers, but right in the middle is one non-kosher butcher. You find a piece of meat right outside the non-kosher butcher, you go after what's called, you say it's probably from the kosher butcher.
That's right. But if you see somebody going out of a shop, but you don't know which shop he came out of, since the suffix arose within the shops, and the shops are in fixed places, it's a special gezeres hakosher, we don't know the logic, we say kol kavua k'mechza mechza, and therefore it is also 50-50. And vice versa. If it's, for example, 5 treifa shops and 1 kosher shop, and he came out from one of the fixed shops, we don't say that it's roiv, therefore it's treif. We say it's suffix treif. You can't eat because it's suffix if you don't get malchus. This one says inside, nine so non treif meat vechas mochus versus schuta mon kosher this chalfuloi choishesh. If you're not sure which one it is, therefore choishesh because kokova mechza. And the says if you find it, talk about chaloif. But the we go after if you find it in the hands of a goy, it's also mutter. Imagine you see a goy walking around with a piece of meat, and what happens is most of the shops sell kosher meat, you're allowed to eat it. Says the Gemara, he was leaning over Chama. You find it hard to walk, so he was leaning on him. He saw one guy cutting meat off his horse and selling it. What? You just said that according to you, it would be mutter to eat it, and obviously that doesn't make any sense. We saw him coming from where the butchers are. Not that he's walking around with a piece of meat stand. We saw him coming from the butchers. But we don't know which butcher he came from. Since the wave of them are kosher, therefore it's okay. Oh, so Shai is not mamish from the butcher's shop, but from the area where the butchers are. He wants to buy meat from the butcher. The butcher didn't like him. There was an animosity between 2 Yidden. Reuven and Shimon owned the butcher shop. So Reuven wanted to buy some meat, and Shimon refused to sell it to him. So what did he do? He asked the guy, go and get me a piece of meat from the shop. He asked somebody else to pick up the meat for him. Right? If the shopkeeper won't sell it to you, he asked him to do it. So what happened was he boasted to the shopkeeper, I managed to get hold of your meat. I bought it through the guy. At the end of the day, you didn't want to sell me meat. I got it anyway. So the shopkeeper was annoyed. What did the shopkeeper say to him? Obviously, that piece of meat which I gave the guy, I gave him a treifa piece of meat. So therefore, you've got an eaten treif today. So what says, if the story came in front of Rabbi, we don't believe the butcher. We don't believe that all the shop meat on that day is treif, because normally we know that person is kosher. The fact that he was animosity and therefore he said it was treif, don't trust him.
Same thing if a woman says right under the chuppah,
yeah.
You don't go after
That's right. Oh, that's what it says. Yeah,
It's the same idea, kind of.
that's the same idea. Rav Nochas at Tamon, Rav went to Yisroel Chumash from Makin, and he saw that there would be Mekel in Bossa. Chuma Alein made a big chuma. This is a special chuma called Bossa Shnis Alim in Ayin, which is also in Cholim. And now, after the rest of the more discuss it for a bit of 4 lines. There's a special chuma that meat which is not in front of you for 1 minute. Is also the famous story of a person who was on a plane, and what happened was he opened up his kosher meat. He went to the bathroom to wash his hands, came back, and he decided not to eat it. The guy said to him, "Why not eating it?" And he said to him, "Because of this Bossa Shnis Alim in Ayin." And the guy said to him, "Indeed, I was curious if kosher meat tastes different, so I swapped some of the meat." This is the Chumah of Rav. Another Gemara gives us a few stories, how to translate, but a few stories based on this Chumah. Chad Ba'anosh was one person, Ozel, top of Chaf Amud Aleph. Boi Mishizka as Kapulte Begaynaro. He wanted to wash his meat in the river, to wash it off. The Insha say he lost it, he lost the meat. Ba'ozele, Choza Boi Misinva, the meat got lost, he dropped the meat. And suddenly he finds another piece of meat, and he thought to himself, it's probably the same piece of meat. If the logic is, if you lose a piece of meat and you find another one very shortly after the river, it should be okay. Why? Oh my, how shot of the maybe the river swept away your piece of meat, and this piece of meat that you're finding now is actually a piece of the Veda. He was carrying a piece of meat. Also, daisa, this week's parsha, daya is a certain kind of bird. It's like a vulture. So the vulture came, snatched the meat, snatched the piece of meat, and then dropped off a piece of meat. So what did the person think to himself? Which piece of meat did the bird drop off? Probably the meat is snatched from me, so it's okay. He can't take that piece of meat. Why? Maybe the bird was grabbed a piece of nevela, dropped that by you, and took your piece of meat away. So if you can't eat it, the Gemara Bavli tells us these stories as well. It's amazing stories. If you've got a piece of meat, you're washing it off in the river, and now you lost it till you find it, or a bird snatches a piece of meat and gives it back to you, well, choishish is a different piece of meat. A very similar story. Kinoi, the river shot up zikim, swept away bottles of wine, and then they found it. Also, the Kamei Yisroel in those days, wine was in leather bags. Leather bags, you'd have to make a knot at the top; they shouldn't spill. If you recognize the knot, it's okay. If you don't recognize the knot, it's no good. That's what we do. Oh, very good. Similar. But you have to recognize it. If you don't recognize it, you can't. The word says the kinikia, there were barrels of wine. They were found in the shul, the bully in a place called Bully. Also, the Yomi, they should recognize the paint. The barrels were all painted a slightly different color. If you recognize the color of the barrels, it's okay. They found a roasted goat in the main town of Gufsa. They made 2 colors. What were the 2 colors? One is there's a shaila of Shavas Aveda, one is a shaila of Bossa Shnis Alim in Ayin. And they permitted it for both. Again, they found a roasted goat, and they permitted it for both reasons. Why is it the mitzvah of Shavas Aveda? Anybody want to give a guess? Yes. Oh, why don't we ask? Because it's a big place, a lot of people. So Paul explains. We should be seeing the Tanya Matzim Yada Avim Yada guys, Mishunas Hayam from the sea, Mishunas Hanor from the river, Misati Gedolim Plati Gedolim from a big place. Most people, when they lose something, and if you lose something in Times Square, you go to Messiash. We should be Maisa, they said, since most of the people around the Yidam, you're allowed to eat it. Ishtakach went to Beis. Rabbi came out to Rabbi's house. He got the governor. They once found a big piece of cheese. Ishtakach put the Levi. They found it in the hotel of Levi. We should be seeing the Talibatz. We had the guys. We had the we started to do you permitted it for the Shabbat. We say, Ashman. It was okay. So the halach is if you find something in a very, very large place, you're allowed to keep it because people give up. I saw that Talmidei Chachamim would announce it. They would declare, even if they found something in a large place. Would you not take it? Piyusa was a very, very big town. He said, if only I would find something in that town, I would then keep it because it would be in the midst of Shavas Aveda. Even so, he announced it. That means like this: there's a midas chasidus. That if you find something in a place which is a very, very lot of people, and therefore it's very likely it was Messiah, there's a midas chasidus that you should still announce it. I just can't decide if I should go back to it. It's going to be On Sunday we have to do a very lot. Okay, let's just do the Mishnah. Maybe this is Yisroel at big delay that which is father Yisroel at big delay that could lost the whole ruach. In any direction, that side. Zechorem, if it's male oilers, they came as if cheshtabim, because most males are oilers, most females are shtabim. Yehuda ba'oilem psochim lepsochim. If it belongs to a Pesach, 30 days for Pesach, it's a common Pesach. That means if it could be a common Pesach, it is a common Pesach. We assume it's common Pesach. But we showed up, how you bash this mitzvah. The halach is whenever you bring a common, you have to bring the sochim. That really means hadid, it belongs to you. Since it belongs to you, you have to bring the sochim. So if that's the case, you have to get a mashkim. I should maybe even the sochim. Don't run away. There's a famous story by Bnei There's somebody that Solomon member once called on that Solomon call. And the person kept fainting, kept trying to revive him. Eventually he said to him, why are you fainting so much? He said, because he just lost 100,000 shekel, which he was going to pay for to his daughter's chasna or something. And this Solomon member just found it. He had kept it because there was no simon. He felt bad, so he gave it to him. So what does Chaim say? Anybody know? Well, he asked him Maisa, because since it was 100,000 shekel belonged to him, so now he owes 10,000 shekel to Maisa.
Why?
Well, because for a minute, he found the money. It belonged to him. Only as a favor, he gave it back. So now you earned 100,000 shekel. If you earn 100,000 shekel, you have to give back 10,000 shekel. No, so the answer is that maybe giving it to the poor, this person, if he was poor, so he's kept it. But the Maisa, let's say he wouldn't have been poor. It would be he would be chayav to the 10,000 shekel Maisa. So the same thing over here, you find an animal, you mochiv in the sochim. But what happened was people would stop finding sheep because they would say to themselves, it's not worth it. But if you find an animal, then the sochim come from the tzibur, Kalis will have to pay for the sochim. Omar Shul Zayin Devam is could base in the second 7 similar kinds of takanas that the based in they provide in the sochim. This is the first one. Yomi says the common sochim. If he brings the sochim with it, give him the shaloi. The tzibur providing the sochim for the goy. A person who dies without Yoshim, the tzibur will have to provide the sochim. With that basic the mincha is brought from the tzibur. It comes from the Yoshin. The being a whole one, the more discusses what's being being a whole one. And Kenim are allowed to use the wood and the salt for their cooking in the Beis HaMikdash. There's no me'ila in the ashes of the Par Adumah. But that if a carbon is bought and it's possible, the tzibur have to replace. Let's say one brings for your ledges and it comes possible, the tzibur have to replace it. The shopkeeper has to. Since machlokes, if the shopkeeper or the tzibur have to replace all the kinim, all the pairs of birds that became possible. Okay, we'll start from the Mishnah Mitzvah Shem on Shabbos 5+7. Maybe we'll finish the Perek. What? Yeah, supposed to up to the Gemara on Chof of Dalef